You won't believe what happened when I found out he was married, and his wife was fucking pregnant with his baby. I never thought I'd fucking end up like this, caught in a love triangle that I didn't even know existed. He promised me every fucking thing, told me we were meant fucking be, and I fucking believed him. Like the fuck? But nothing could have prepared me for the gut-wrenching moment when he dropped the bombshell that would shatter everything. Okay, I will drop the language. I am so pained and, oh my god! 3 weeks in, I was completely in love with him. He was my dream guy, charming, funny, and seemingly perfect. I asked him point blank if he was married. He said no. I trusted him. But the truth, it was so much worse than I could have ever imagined. He was already married, and his wife was pregnant, across the world. How could he lie to me like that? And why did he keep chasing after me even after I exposed him to his wife? Was he trying to destroy me, or was this all just some twisted game? This isn't just another cheating story. This is a real story about betrayal, heartbreak, and an unforgiving pursuit that nearly tore me apart. What happened next? The truth came crashing down in a way I never could have expected. But let me take you back to the moment when everything changed. It's not just his lies. It's how he kept chasing me, how his wife found out, and how the emotional fallout felt like I was suffocating in my own choices. Stay with me, because this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and revenge. You won't believe what happened next because it will blow you off your seat. I promise. Let's get started. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when she first saw him. The sun streamed through the office windows, casting a warm, golden light over the room, but none of it reached her. Her mind was elsewhere, buried deep in the never-ending pile of paperwork that seemed to multiply no matter how many hours she put into her work. Her name was Sarah, and her life had become a blur of routine. Wake up, work, go home, repeat. The spark of excitement that once filled her heart when she first opened the doors to her small marketing firm had long since died, smothered under deadlines, client demands, and the weight of an unfulfilled life. But that day, something felt different. It wasn't just the glow of the afternoon sun that caught her eye. It was him, Ethan. At first, it was a simple glance, a fleeting moment that might have been missed if she hadn't been looking at the exact right spot at the exact right time. But their eyes met, and something inside her clicked. It wasn't love at first sight, no, not exactly. But it was a connection, a strange magnetic force pulling her in that she couldn't explain. He was tall, around 6 feet, with dark hair that had a bit of a wave to it, just long enough to be tousled but not enough to look messy. His jawline was strong, his features sharp yet somehow softened by the warmth in his dark brown eyes. There was a softness to him, but also something undeniably confident, a quiet strength that immediately intrigued her. Sarah looked away quickly, embarrassed to have been caught staring. But when she looked up again, he was still watching her, that same intense gaze locked on hers. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. "Hi," he said casually, as though it was the most natural thing in the world to speak to someone like that, someone who had just made her pulse race. "I'm Ethan. I don't think we've met before." His voice was deep, smooth, rich, even, and the way he said her name made her feel as though it was meant to be spoken by him and no one else. He was charismatic, the kind of man who could make anyone feel like the center of his world with just a few words. And that was exactly what he did. Sarah smiled, a little unsure of herself, but the warmth in his smile made her feel at ease almost immediately. "I'm Sarah," she replied, her voice sounding a little too high-pitched for her liking. She hated that she was so self-conscious in the moment, but he didn't seem to notice. In fact, his eyes were kind, and he listened intently, giving her his full attention, something that felt incredibly rare. "Are you new here?" he asked, glancing around the office. She noticed how his eyes lingered on her for just a second longer than necessary, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just genuine. "No," she answered, shaking her head. "I've been working here for a couple of years now. Just busy, you know?" He nodded in understanding. "I get it. The grind never stops." There was a brief pause, and then he added with a grin, "I actually just moved into the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by, maybe find a new coffee shop or something." "Right here in this area?" she asked, surprised. She had lived here for several years and had never seen him around before. "Yeah," he replied, running a hand through his hair, looking almost bashful now. "I just moved in last week. It's funny, I feel like I've already run into you twice today, and I only just got here." Sarah raised an eyebrow, a little confused. "What do you mean?" "Well," Ethan said, leaning in slightly, "I've been walking around, getting a feel for the place, and I swear, I've seen you from a distance a couple of times today. Thought I might just be imagining it. She felt her cheeks flush. What was he saying? Had he really noticed her more than once? Her mind raced, but she tried to keep her voice steady. I don't know. Maybe you've just got good instincts. Or maybe I've just got that I'm always working look about me. His laugh was easy, a sound that made her smile despite herself. Maybe. But I'm definitely glad we ran into each other. There it was again, his smile. It was warm, easygoing, the kind of smile that made a person feel like they mattered, like they were seen. And right there, in that moment, Sarah realized something she hadn't been able to admit to herself in a long time. She was lonely. More than lonely, she was starved for connection, for attention, for someone to see her, really see her, beyond the exhausted exterior of the workaholic she'd become. Ethan's smile promised something more. A distraction, maybe, or something else entirely. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt important. They exchanged numbers that afternoon. Just a casual exchange, nothing that screamed romantic interest. Or so she thought. Over the next few days, the conversations began. They started slow, a few texts here and there, then more frequent phone calls. He was funny, intelligent, and easy to talk to. They shared common interests, books, movies, even a love for old-school vinyl records. He made her laugh, and that laughter felt like a breath of fresh air. He was someone who understood the weight of the world on her shoulders, yet knew how to help her take it off, even if just for a little while. It didn't take long before Sarah realized just how much she enjoyed talking to him. Ethan was thoughtful, kind, and never seemed to tire of their conversations, no matter how trivial the topic. She found herself thinking about him more and more, even though she tried to tell herself not to get too invested. But how could she not? When someone made you feel like you mattered, like you were important to them, how could you not get caught up in it? 3 weeks later, Sarah was in love. The realization hit her like a freight train. One evening, while they were talking on the phone, she found herself laughing at something he'd said, and for a split second, it all became clear. She had fallen for him. Hard. It wasn't just that Ethan was handsome, or charming, or had a voice that sent shivers down her spine. It was that he saw her, truly saw her, and made her feel like she was worth something again. In the endless cycle of deadlines and responsibilities, she had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. But with him, it all came rushing back. He felt the same, he told her. Every conversation was an affirmation of how he admired her, how he cared for her. He called her beautiful, though she didn't believe it. He made her feel like she mattered in a way she hadn't in years. They were a team, he said. It felt like they were building something that couldn't be broken, no matter the distance between them. There were moments when she caught herself wondering if it was all too good to be true. The way he looked at her, the way he held her attention so effortlessly, it almost felt like a dream. But every time that nagging thought crept in, Ethan's reassurance would chase it away. He loved her. He wanted her. And that was all that mattered. But just as everything seemed perfect, as if they had found their rhythm, he dropped the bombshell. It came unexpectedly, right after a beautiful evening together. They had shared a quiet dinner, laughter, and easy conversation. Sarah was floating on air, thinking about how happy she was, how lucky she felt. She had never been more certain of her feelings for Ethan. Then, without warning, his face grew serious. His eyes shifted to the floor, avoiding her gaze. The change in his demeanor was so sudden, so jarring, it stole the breath from her lungs. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to sound calm. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice suddenly small, her mind racing with possibilities. I'm married," he confessed, the words hanging in the air between them like a deadly fog. The world stopped. Time slowed. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't speak. The moment stretched on, endless, as the truth shattered her like glass. "I'm married," Ethan repeated, his eyes finally meeting hers. "And my wife, she's pregnant." In an instant, everything she had believed in crumbled. The room felt suffocating as Ethan's words hung in the air, the weight of his confession pressing down on Sarah's chest, forcing the breath out of her lungs. She sat there, still in shock, her mind racing, trying to process what he had just said. Married? Pregnant? No, it couldn't be true. She must have heard him wrong. There was no way. But the coldness in his eyes told a different story. He wasn't joking. This was real. The man she had fallen in love with, the one who had made her feel seen, who had made her laugh, who had given her hope, was married. And worse still, he was about to become a father. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself, trying to keep the emotions from spilling out. How had this happened? How had she allowed herself to get so deep, so involved, so completely enamored with a man who had been lying to her from the start? "Sarah," Ethan said, his voice breaking, his words softer now, like a man begging for forgiveness. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you." She shook her head, her mind reeling. Her thoughts were in chaos, hurt, disbelief, anger. Every time she tried to focus on what he was saying, another wave of emotions hit her, pulling her under. You're married?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, disbelief thick in every syllable. "Yes," he answered, his voice cracking. "I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest with you from the start, but I didn't want to lose you." The words felt like knives, slicing through her chest, digging deeper with each breath she took. Sarah looked at him, seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. Not the charming man who had swept her off her feet, not the attentive lover who made her feel like she was the only woman in the world, but a man who had been living a lie. A man who had deceived her, manipulated her, all while knowing that he was betraying someone else. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper now, thick with emotion. "Why did you lie to me, Ethan? How could you look me in the eye every day and pretend like you weren't married? How could you make me believe you were everything I wanted, when you were someone else's husband?" Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes brimming with tears. He reached out to touch her hand, but she recoiled, pulling it back sharply, like his touch had burned her. The silence between them stretched on, thick and suffocating. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said again, his voice strained. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want to lie to you, but I was afraid you'd leave me. I've never felt like this before, not with anyone. I thought I could make it work, thought I could love you and still be with her, but I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The confession didn't bring any relief. Instead, it made the whole situation worse. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the fact that he had known all along and still allowed her to fall for him, to give him everything. She had trusted him with her heart, and he had shattered it without a second thought. His eyes were searching hers, pleading for understanding, but she couldn't give him that. How could she? How could she understand the man who had so easily played with her emotions, who had so carelessly torn apart the life she had been building with him? No, there was no understanding here, only anger and disbelief. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I gave you everything, Ethan. Everything. And you lied to me. You knew, and you still let me fall in love with you. You made me believe that we had something real, something special. How could you do this to me?" Tears started to fall from her eyes now, her face flushed with humiliation and anger. She felt foolish. Stupid. How could she have been so blind, so naive? How could she have trusted someone so completely, only to find out that they were never who they said they were? Ethan's face crumpled as if her words were knives, and he stood up abruptly, pacing in front of her. "I'm sorry," he repeated over and over again, as though those words could fix everything. "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted this. I thought I could handle both worlds, keep my life with her, and still be with you. But I was wrong. I was wrong to lie to you. I was wrong to even think I could do this." Sarah's breath came in short, ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her chest as the anger surged inside her like a tidal wave. This was not a man in love. This was a man who had used her. A man who had played her, manipulated her heart, and taken advantage of her trust. Her stomach twisted with revulsion as she thought of the moments they had shared, the intimacy, the tenderness, the lies that had been wrapped in those moments. "She's pregnant," he said, his voice breaking even further. "I didn't know how to tell you, Sarah. I didn't know how to explain it. She lives in another country, and I only speak to her on the phone, but I promise you, she's the one I'm supposed to be with. I thought I could keep it from you, but I can't lie anymore. You deserve the truth." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. His wife pregnant, the woman who was carrying his child, the woman who had no idea that the man she was married to was here, in another city, with another woman, sharing moments of love and affection. Sarah's heart broke for her, but the pain in her chest was overwhelming. She sat there, frozen, unable to say anything. She couldn't even process the words he had just spoken. How could this be real? How could he have been so cruel, so calculating, to deceive her like this? "I didn't want to hurt you," Ethan repeated, his voice small now, almost pleading. "I didn't want you to be a part of this mess, but now you're in it. And I can't undo the damage I've done, but I promise I'll always love you. I'll always be here for you." She shook her head, pushing herself back from the table, the anger in her chest bubbling to the surface like a boiling pot of water. "No, Ethan. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to tell me you love me after everything you've done. You don't get to sit here and act like you didn't just destroy everything we had. I trusted you. I trusted you with my heart, and you." Her voice broke, and she had to pause to collect herself. "You lied to me." Ethan took a step toward her, but she stood up, backing away, the tears now streaming down her face. She didn't want his comfort. She didn't want his apologies. She wanted to be left alone, to have the time to process what had just been ripped from her life. "You need to leave," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Just go. I can't. I can't be around you right now. I need space to think. I need to figure out how to deal with this." Ethan opened his mouth to say something, but she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear any more excuses, any more apologies. They meant nothing to her now. Everything he had said, everything they had shared, it was all tainted with lies. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, leaving her in the suffocating silence of her apartment. The sound of the door closing behind him was like a final, cruel punctuation to everything that had just transpired. Sarah sank to the floor, her hands pressed against her face as the tears came in full force. She had been a fool who had believed in something that was never real. And now, her heart felt like a shattered mirror, each piece sharp and dangerous, cutting her deeper with every thought. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected. Amid the pain, there was a flicker of something else, something darker. Betrayal. Anger. The need for justice. Because Sarah knew deep down that this wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan had lied to her. He had torn her heart apart. And now, she would make him feel the weight of his actions. The question was no longer about how she would heal. It was about how she would make him pay. The game had changed, and she wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. Not after everything he had done to her. Not after everything he had taken. And she was just getting started. Sarah sat motionless on the cold tile floor, her back pressed against the wall, the weight of everything that had just transpired settling over her like a heavy fog. Ethan's face, those sweet, pleading eyes, kept flashing in her mind. She tried to push it away, but the images were too vivid, too real. It had only been hours since he left, but it felt like a lifetime. She had replayed the conversation over and over in her mind, the words he had said, his excuses, his apologies. None of it made any sense. How could she have been so blind? How could she have believed a man who had lied to her from the start? And more than that, how could she have allowed herself to get so entangled in his web of deceit? The anger was still bubbling beneath the surface, hot and burning. But now there was something else, something darker, more calculated. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It wasn't even about the heartbreak. It was about revenge. It wasn't enough for Sarah to sit there and cry. No, Ethan had taken something from her trust, her heart, and now it was time for him to feel the consequences of his actions. He thought he could play her for a fool, but she wasn't about to let him get away with it. She wasn't going to be a victim. Not anymore. It was as though a switch had flipped inside her. In that moment, Sarah realized that she had power, the kind of power she hadn't known she possessed until now. She had the ability to make him feel the same pain she felt, the same betrayal, the same crushing weight of deceit. And she would do it. She would make him pay. Her mind raced as she considered the possibilities. What would hurt him the most? What would make him feel the agony of losing something he loved? He had destroyed her, and now it was her turn to destroy him. But she wasn't going to do it the easy way. She wasn't going to settle for petty revenge. No, she wanted something deeper, something more meaningful. She wanted him to suffer, to feel the full weight of the destruction he had caused. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The streets were busy, people moving in and out of stores, walking to and from work, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside her. No one knew what she was about to do. No one knew the darkness that had taken root in her heart. Her fingers traced the cold glass of the window, the reflection of her own face staring back at her. She hardly recognized herself. The woman in the reflection was someone different, someone stronger, someone more dangerous. She had been weak once, vulnerable, trusting. But that woman was gone, and in her place was someone new, someone who had nothing left to lose. Her phone buzzed on the counter, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at it, her stomach sinking as she saw the name on the screen. Ethan. He had been calling her non-stop since he left, but she had ignored every call. His messages were relentless, pleading for her to talk to him, to forgive him. But Sarah wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. They meant nothing. They were empty words designed to manipulate her back into his arms, back into his web of lies. With a quick swipe, she silenced the phone and tossed it onto the couch. She wasn't going to play his game anymore. She had a different plan now, one that didn't involve him. She had already done the unthinkable. She had sent the picture of them together to his wife. That had been the first step, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Her heart thudded in her chest as she thought of his wife. She had no idea. No idea that her husband had been here, in another city, with another woman, making love to her, telling her he loved her. Sarah couldn't even begin to imagine what it would feel like to be in her shoes, to have her world ripped apart like that. But she knew one thing for sure: his wife deserved to know. She had the right to know what kind of man Ethan really was. She had the right to know how much of a liar he truly was. Sarah pulled her phone from the couch and opened the message she had sent earlier. His wife had responded quickly, her message a mixture of confusion, anger, and betrayal. She had blocked Ethan on all platforms, but she hadn't yet reached out to Sarah. That was about to change. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen. She knew what she had to do. She had to push this further. Ethan's wife needed to hear everything. The full truth, the raw pain that Sarah was feeling. And Sarah would be the one to make sure she knew. She would be the one to bring the truth crashing down on Ethan's perfect little world. With a deep breath, she began to type. "I'm sorry to do this to you, but I know you deserve the truth. Ethan is not the man he pretends to be. He's been lying to you. He's been seeing me for the last 3 weeks. We've been intimate. He told me that you live in another country and that you hardly ever see each other. He's been pretending like everything was fine while he's been here with me. And now, I don't know how you'll feel, but I wanted you to know what kind of man your husband is. He's been lying to both of us. And I don't want you to feel like you're the only one who's been hurt." As Sarah hit send, a rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins. She felt a strange sense of power, the kind that comes from knowing that you're in control of a situation. Ethan had spent weeks lying, manipulating, and deceiving. But now the tables had turned. Now he would be the one to feel the sting of betrayal. It wasn't enough to destroy his trust in her. She wanted to destroy everything he had built. And his wife, she realized, was the key to that. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Ethan calling. It was a message from his wife. "I'm in shock. I had no idea. I thought everything was fine, but now I see the truth. I don't know what to say. I never thought he could do this to me." Sarah's heart twisted as she read the message. She had wanted to hurt Ethan, to make him suffer, but seeing his wife's pain made her second-guess herself for a split second. She felt the weight of the situation, a situation that was far more complicated than she had anticipated. But the truth had to come out. She had already done this, and now there was no turning back. She replied quickly, knowing that she had to keep pushing, to make sure the truth was exposed. "I'm sorry you're going through this. I know how hard this must be, but I couldn't just sit back and let him lie to both of us. You deserve to know. You deserve to be with someone who loves and respects you, not someone who's been lying to you." As she hit send, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had crossed a line. There was no going back now. She had exposed Ethan's lies to his wife, but there was still more to do. There was still more pain to be caused. She wanted Ethan to feel the full weight of his deceit. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call. "Ethan." She stared at the screen for a moment, the anger rising inside her once again. She had no intention of answering. She didn't want to hear his voice. She didn't want to hear his excuses. But something made her pause just for a moment. She swiped the screen to reject the call. The power was in her hands now, and she wasn't going to let him take that from her. As the phone fell silent, Sarah felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Ethan had played his game, and now it was her turn. The game wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. She stood up, walking to the door, determined to see this through to the end. Ethan might have thought he could break her. He might have thought he could get away with everything, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. And now, she was going to make him regret every single lie he had told. The storm was coming, and Ethan had no idea how badly it was going to hurt. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air, suffocating Sarah as she paced back and forth in her small apartment. The harsh fluorescent lights above flickered, casting long shadows against the walls, as if even the building itself could feel the storm that was brewing inside her. Her fingers tapped impatiently against the counter, the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. She had never been one for revenge, never sought out conflict or drama, but this was different. Ethan had taken something from her, something she could never get back. Her phone had been buzzing for hours. It was Ethan. Over and over, his name flashed on the screen, Each call a desperate plea, a false apology, a manipulative attempt to win her back. He didn't understand yet. He didn't understand the depth of the mess he had made. How could he? He was the one who had lied. He was the one who had made the choice to keep his secrets locked away, to live in a world of half-truths and deception. But now the floodgates had been opened. His wife knew. She knew everything. Sarah let out a shaky breath, glancing down at her phone once more. His latest message was still unread. "I can't believe you did this to me. We were supposed to be together. I told you I loved you. Why are you doing this?" The audacity of his words made Sarah's blood boil. How could he still be trying to manipulate her, even now, after everything? It was as if the hurt he had caused her didn't matter. His marriage, his family, none of it mattered. Only his own needs, his own desires mattered. He was still trying to make her feel guilty, still trying to win her over with empty promises. He couldn't even fathom that she might have had enough. He had already destroyed the trust she'd placed in him. He had no idea that there was nothing left to salvage. Her fingers tightened into fists. This was it. There was no turning back now. The moment she had sent that picture to his wife, everything had changed. Ethan had already lost control of the narrative, and Sarah wasn't going to let him regain it. She was done being the one who cowered, the one who had to apologize for someone else's mistakes. This time, Ethan would pay for his deceit, for the way he had treated both her and his wife. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "I swear I'll fix this. Just talk to me. We can work this out. Work it out." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. It wasn't about working anything out anymore. The truth had come crashing down on both of them, and there was no fixing that. The man who had once seemed so perfect, so devoted, was nothing more than a liar, a cheat. And his wife. She had trusted him, believed in him, and he had shattered that trust. She couldn't even begin to imagine the depth of her pain. It was the kind of betrayal that sank deep into your soul, gnawing away at you until there was nothing left but darkness. And yet, here she was, still reeling from the consequences of Ethan's lies. But this time, there was something different. This time, she felt a strange sense of power, a sense of control. Ethan wasn't the only one who could wield influence. She had the power to make him feel everything he had made her feel. He was going to experience the same brokenness, the same devastation, and he wasn't going to see it coming. Suddenly, her phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen wasn't Ethan's. It was his wife. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to do. Was she ready to face her? To hear the voice of the woman who had been so profoundly hurt by everything that had happened? The woman who had been betrayed by the man Sarah had fallen in love with? With a steadying breath, Sarah answered. "Hello." Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. "Is this Sarah?" The voice on the other end of the line asked, a mixture of confusion, hurt, and disbelief thick in her accent. The voice sounded tired, worn down by the weight of everything she had just discovered. "Yes, this is Sarah." Her stomach twisted as she spoke, and for a moment, the anger that had fueled her every move seemed to dissipate. The reality of the situation hit her full force, and she felt a deep pang of sympathy for this woman. This stranger who had been living in a lie. I don't even know where to start," the woman said, her voice cracking. "I never thought he could do this to me. We've been together for years. He told me he loved me, that I was the one. How could he betray me like this?" Sarah closed her eyes, listening to the raw emotion in the woman's voice. She could feel her pain, her heartbreak, but the words that came next weren't meant to soothe or comfort. They were meant to make the truth undeniable, to force Ethan's wife to see what kind of man he really was. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I know this is hard, but he's been seeing me for the past 3 weeks. He told me everything, about how you live in another country, how you barely see each other. He's been lying to both of us. I didn't want to hurt you, but you deserve to know the truth. He's been with me, and he's been with you, and all the while he's been telling us both that he loves us. But he's lying. He's lying to you just like he lied to me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, Sarah thought the woman had hung up, but then she spoke again, her voice shaking with fury and disbelief. You have to be lying. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't even know who he is anymore." The pain in her voice hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. This wasn't just about Ethan's betrayal of Sarah. This was about a woman who had been deceived for years, who had built her life around a lie, and now had to watch it all crumble around her. Sarah's anger wavered for a moment, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. But the truth was out now, and there was no taking it back. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice softening. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just couldn't let him keep lying to both of us. You deserve better than this." The woman was silent again, her breath ragged. Sarah could feel the weight of her words settle heavily between them. It was impossible to know how much damage had been done, but she couldn't turn back now. The truth had been laid bare. There was no one seeing it, no one knowing it. I need time," the woman finally said. "I don't know what to do. I need time to process all of this." "I understand," Sarah replied softly. "Take all the time you need." The line went silent. Sarah slowly ended the call, her heart heavy with the consequences of what she had just done. For a moment, she thought she might break down, might let the weight of everything wash over her, but she couldn't afford that. Not now. Ethan wasn't the only one who had been living in a lie. She had built something too, a fantasy of love, of security, of a future that had been shattered the moment she learned the truth. Her phone buzzed once more. This time it was Ethan again. "You did this. You've destroyed everything. You'll regret this." Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she typed her response slowly, deliberately. "No. You destroyed everything the moment you lied to me." She hit send and tossed the phone aside. There was no need to respond anymore. The game was over. Ethan's world was crumbling, and it was only a matter of time before he felt the full force of his own destruction. And as Sarah stood there, staring at her reflection in the dark window, she realized that she didn't need to play by his rules anymore. She wasn't the one who had been deceived. She was the one who had uncovered the truth. And now, she was the one in control. The storm had only just begun. The days after Sarah's phone call with Ethan's wife were a blur. Each hour felt like it stretched into eternity, the silence in her apartment ringing louder than any words she could have spoken. For the first time in weeks, she was free from the constant barrage of Ethan's messages, but the freedom came at a heavy price. She had done what she felt was necessary, what was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The devastation had been unleashed, but the end was nowhere near. Ethan had disappeared from her life for the moment, and for a brief time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this would be the end of it, that maybe she could escape the wreckage and move on. But deep down, she knew the truth. Ethan was not the type to let go so easily, and neither was his wife. She had only made the first move by confronting Sarah, but Sarah knew she was likely to hear from her again. Or worse, hear from Ethan himself. The heavy hum of Sarah's phone breaking the stillness of the room jerked her from her thoughts. She grabbed it before it could ring again, her heart leaping in her chest. She knew it wasn't Ethan. Ethan had been eerily silent for the past 2 days, and even though Sarah had half expected it, part of her still believed he would try to come crawling back. No, this wasn't Ethan. It was the woman, the one whose life Sarah had irreparably altered. His wife. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a brief moment before swiping it open. The message was simple, direct, and packed with an intensity that immediately sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "I need to talk to you. Now." There was no pleasantries, no time wasted on small talk. The words were clear. The woman was done with the games. She was coming for answers. Sarah's pulse quickened. A dozen different scenarios played out in her mind, each one more intense than the last. Would she show up at her store? Knock on her door? How would this conversation go? What could she possibly say to make it right? The truth was, there was no way to make it right. There was no escaping the fact that Sarah had gotten involved in something she should have stayed far away from. But now, standing on the precipice of what might be the most difficult confrontation of her life, Sarah found herself strangely calm. The reality of her actions had set in long ago, and she had no illusions left about who she was dealing with. Ethan's wife had been betrayed just as much as Sarah had, and now, the reckoning was at hand. A knock at the door shattered her reverie. Slowly, Sarah stood up, her knees feeling a little unsteady. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the sound of the knock felt like a judgment, the final stage in her emotional trial. She couldn't run anymore. No more messages. No more hiding. She had made her choices, and now the world had caught up with her. Her hands trembled as she walked to the door. With a deep breath, she opened it. Standing in the doorway was the woman, the one who had once been a stranger. The woman who had been unknowingly sharing her husband with Sarah. Ethan's wife was taller than Sarah had imagined, her face pale, her eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept in days. She looked like someone who had been through a storm, someone who had been thrown into a nightmare and was still struggling to wake up from it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt thick, heavy, charged with the gravity of what had transpired. Sarah felt the weight of her guilt pressing down on her chest, but she didn't back away. She couldn't. Finally, the woman spoke, her voice low but steady. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she asked, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. Sarah swallowed hard, the sting of those words landing squarely on her shoulders. She did know what she'd done, but the question felt like an accusation. And perhaps it was, "I know," Sarah replied softly. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't let him keep lying to both of us." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't look away. "You could have walked away. You didn't have to get involved with him. You could have just left him alone." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain why she had gotten involved with Ethan, how deeply she had been swept up in his charm, his lies. But she couldn't. She couldn't justify what had happened. No amount of words could fix what had been broken. "I never wanted to be in the middle of this," Sarah finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I thought he was different. I thought he loved me." The woman's gaze softened for the briefest of moments, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She crossed her arms, staring at Sarah with a mix of anger and pain in her eyes. "So, you've been seeing my husband behind my back, knowing I'm pregnant and we're thousands of miles apart." The bitterness in her voice was undeniable, but there was something else in her eyes now. A quiet resignation, a flicker of understanding, even if she hadn't fully grasped the enormity of what had happened. Sarah couldn't help but flinch at the mention of the pregnancy. She hadn't known. Ethan had made it sound like his wife was practically non-existent, living in another country, disconnected from him in every way possible. But now, hearing the truth in full force, the realization hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. His wife wasn't just another distant figure. She was a woman carrying his child. She had been carrying his child while Ethan had been with Sarah. The guilt weighed even heavier now. "I didn't know," Sarah said, her voice tight. "I didn't know about the pregnancy. He never told me about it. He said he was separated from you, that you two barely spoke. I didn't know until I found out the hard way." Ethan's wife seemed to absorb this information, her lips pressing into a thin line as she processed the revelation. It was clear that the shock was still fresh for her, but there was something in her demeanor that spoke of a woman who had been through far worse, who had been tested in ways Sarah couldn't even begin to understand. She wasn't the naive victim anymore. She had grown into something more resilient, something stronger than Sarah had ever imagined. "You still should have stayed away from him," she said quietly, the anger in her voice turning into something more solemn. "But I know why you did what you did. I get it. You were deceived, just like I was. You loved him, didn't you?" Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. "I did." The woman's eyes softened once again, though there was no malice in her gaze. "I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did. I don't know if I can forgive him. But I need to hear something from you." "What?" Sarah asked, afraid of what might come next. "Why didn't you just walk away? You had the chance to. You could have left him and saved yourself the heartache. But you didn't." Sarah swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. The truth was simple. She hadn't been able to. She had been trapped in a web of lies, and for a moment, Ethan had seemed like everything she had ever wanted. She had believed in him, and that belief had been the one thing she could never let go of. "I couldn't," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't walk away because I was in love with him, and even though I know it was wrong, even though I know it was stupid, I couldn't stop myself." The woman's expression softened once again, but it wasn't with sympathy. It was with a strange understanding, as though she had been exactly where Sarah was and had come out on the other side. "Sometimes," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "we all make choices that we regret. But now you've made yours, and I've made mine. He's not worth it. He's not worth the pain." There was silence between them, the weight of the conversation settling in. "Goodbye, Sarah," Lillian said finally, her voice still filled with a quiet strength. "You can't fix what's broken, but you can walk away." She turned, her heels clicking softly against the concrete, but then she paused at the edge of the hallway. With a slow glance over her shoulder, her expression shifted from stoic to something more dangerous, almost amused. "Oh, and Sarah?" Her voice was silk over steel. "That pregnancy test I sent him? Fake. I needed to see how far he'd go for a son. And you?" She let out a soft, cold chuckle. "You were just part of the test." Then she walked away, leaving Sarah frozen in the doorway, heartbroken, humiliated, and completely destroyed. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the echo of Lillian's heels fading down the hall. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run after her and demand to know why. Why play her like this? Why drag her into their toxic mess just to prove a point? But all she could do was stand there, shaking, gutted, humiliated. She had believed Ethan's lies. She had trusted him. She had even imagined a future with him. And now, none of it had been real. A game, a test, a setup. And Lillian didn't just walk away. She won. With a fake pregnancy, she exposed her husband's disloyalty, revealed his desperation, and showed Sarah exactly where she stood in the food chain. At the bottom, used, discarded, and left choking on the ashes of a love that was never hers to begin with. She didn't lose her husband. She let him fail. And as the final click of Lillian's heels vanished around the corner, Sarah realized the worst part wasn't that she had been lied to. The worst part was that Lillian had been watching it all unfold the entire time, with eyes wide open and a smile just waiting to bloom. Did Lillian overreacted? I think she did, though. I can't stop crying. What exactly the fuck should I do? I thought I was the main character. Turns out I was just a plot twist.